Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Julia Becker and I'm the Content Marketing and Account Manager for Greatways. We're happy to present today's webinar in partnership with ShipWell. While it's critical to identify and resolve issues quickly, traditional methods can leave room for error, affecting the success of your supply chain operations. Today, you'll be hearing how you can empower your team to stay ahead of disruption and focus on high-impact initiatives across your supply chain. I'll be joined by Jason Traff, ShipWell's president and co-founder, and Ishan Kumar, vice president of product. We'll also have a live Q&A with both speakers following the discussion. But before we get started, I'd like to cover just a few quick housekeeping items. First, if you have any issues during the webinar, please feel free to reach out to our team via the audience chat function in your webinar console. If you have any questions that you'd like to ask our presenters, you may enter those through the Q&A box in your console. We'll answer as many as possible during the live Q&A following the presentation. We'll be sending a link to the recording of this webinar tomorrow if you'd like to view it on demand or share it with your colleagues. At this point, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Jason to kick us off on today's discussion. Great to have you here today, Jason.
Thanks so much, Julia. We're excited to spend the next half hour discussing how technology can help minimize the impact of disruptions in your supply chain. Thank you all so much for joining today. My goal is to make this a really impactful 30 minutes and then followed by 30 minutes of amazing Q&A. So let's start out by discussing some of the unique challenges that we're seeing in the industry today, followed by outlining some of the different ways our customers have been able to minimize the negative impacts of these disruptions. And finally, let's go into how the impact technology can have on your business. So the biggest challenge right now is actually twofold. First, we have the fact that customer expectations are on the rise. There we go. That seems like the right spot. There we go. First, we have the fact that customer expectations are on the rise. And second is, of course, the volatility in the market today. Taken together, this has caused the majority of supply chains to explode in complexity. According to a report by Geodis Supply Chain Worldwide, 70% of firms describe their supply chain as either very or extremely complex, with 74% saying they use 4 to 5 different transportation modes in the supply chain. In the past year, we've seen how some of these outside forces can drastically impact supply chains. Everything from COVID to the snowstorms, which were super fun in Texas, the Suez Canal, cyber attacks, the list is actually pretty long. So if you look over the course of that year, the supply shock that started in China in early 2020, followed by the blow of the global economy shutting down, exposed just how vital a resilient supply chain is and what can happen when things go wrong. Adding to this fact that COVID-19 has also brought about a huge spike in demand, while load-to-truck ratio is tightening and the market has seen a lack of capacity. And the thing is, this increased demand comes with higher expectations as well. People have spent the last year ordering Amazon Prime at home. So regardless of what disruptions are occurring, customers expect products to be delivered on time to keep their operations running. The more people experience the speed, reliability, and transparency of shipments in their personal lives, the more they expect that for all shipments. All of this comes together to make proactive exception management critical to meeting these challenges. So before I go into Ishan's bit, let's go into a poll. So for the audience, where have you seen the greatest disruptions in your supply chain over the last year? There are 4 choices. First, international import, export, custom delays. Second is truckload capacity issues. Third is seasonal impacts, which is like a road check week, produce season, something like that. And fourth and final is day-to-day challenges. This is everything from weather to traffic to just the broad spectrum of things that can go wrong any given day. So I'll give another 5 to 10 seconds or so for everyone to get their responses in, and then we will jump into the poll results. I have my own personal feeling about which one I think is going to win, but I don't want to bias anything by talking about it. So, all right, let's jump into the results. Ooh, okay, all right. So I actually thought it was going to be international import-export customs delays, which came in second.
Yeah, my bet was truckload capacity issues given the recent. Where do we stand?
Yeah, it's very interesting. And only 5% seasonal impacts. Very cool.
I wonder if that's anticipated that as part of their planning operations.
I think people are starting to get better at that bit, right? It's more of the parts you can't predict. So to keep us moving, let's talk about minimizing these disruptions. So in just about every industry, no matter how big or small the company, we're all dealing with a lot of the same challenges and disruptions. We've seen time and time again that manual processes for identifying and managing exceptions are really no longer sufficient. Fundamentally, they are unable to scale, they lead to human error, and they don't provide that proactive issue resolution that people are really looking for. So enough of the challenges. I'm going to turn things over to Ishan now so that we can dive into some of the solutions. So Ishan, for companies that are looking to address these issues, where should they start?
Thanks, Jason. I follow a very basic principle around dealing with complex systems, whether you're talking about processes or you're talking about like how do you break down a problem, right? If there's a performance issue that's very complicated. And we found like key steps to really establishing a proactive supply chain is in being able to anticipate the disruptions, identify or assess the state of the operations, and then finally leverage automation or technology either to mitigate the risk or if issues do arise, how to address them. So that's one thing, but if you think about scale, you have to be proficient at these steps, and we need more than just human brain power. I know a lot of you are very experienced experts in your field, but oftentimes when I observe folks, they're processing information in like 5 or 10 or 15 different browser tabs, trying to correlate data and information and making sure they're making the best decision possible. And so at some point that breaks down, and you start thinking about how do I get all this information in a way that allows me to scale. And so you start thinking about computers or machine learning and trying to bring that data, the inputs that are coming in, but perform human-like tasks, right? And most of you may know or may not know that machine learning is in everyday things today. If you think about doorbells, if you think about thermostats, even your email, your mobile phone, it's being leveraged to help kind of do things like recognition or make decisions on your behalf. So that's like the consumer side of it. You're looking ahead at big storylines where technology is being used, and you'll see that ML is kind of just impacting the way global supply chains work as well, for good reason. My previous experience, I used to work at a test and measurement company, and they'll talk about measuring the real world. And one of the reasons why I love supply chain is because it's connecting technology and what happens on the ground, so to speak. And that generates a tremendous amount of data, right? And we're all, I think if you follow the headlines and where technology is going, we're trying to get more data, more information, whether it's at the good level or the trailer or the vehicle itself. What we're trying to do is take that data and use machine learning and to tailor-made to identify the issues in your supply chain. So with this ability to assess an incredible amount of distinct data points, which is what machine learning is built to do, you can identify issues at the moment they arise. Not only that, but thanks to precision that it provides, it can also share guidance and automation or manual solutions to provide you information that helps you address the issue very quickly. And just more broadly, right? Like IBM's conducting studies out in the marketplace, and they're saying best-in-class companies are investing in, more than 50% are investing in AI or ML technologies for their supply chain. So they're really diving in, right? And while the idea may feel intimidating, I think what you should be taking away from an AI ML perspective is that it's already pervasive, it's accessible in everyday life, and that can be easily incorporated into your supply chain.
It's very cool. I mean, it's one of the reasons why my smart thermostat keeps changing itself, which in Texas right now is not a bad problem. All right, so we're on to another poll. Over the next few slides, we're going to go over some of the opportunities we've identified to streamline, improve operations with this industry-changing technology. But for this poll, I think it's sometimes easy to get wrapped up in the idea that machine learning is intimidating or unattainable. And I don't think that's really the case anymore. Our team has spent time working with our customers to identify and understand what technology they need to make their operations run smoother. Technology can be very flashy, very attention-grabbing, but we found that what is more important is that it works and it helps them. Everything else is kind of beside the point. So the fact is, no matter how cool or interesting technology is, it always has a limited impact if the user doesn't know how to use it or finds it difficult. So this poll is really more about how you're managing your current operations. Is your supply chain where you want it to be today? So the three options are, yes, we have great visibility into our supply chain and have a proactive approach, which that'd be amazing. Second, no, but it's close and we have a plan to get there in the next 3 years. And third, no, we need help to get it to where we want it. Once again, the poll is anonymous, no judgment for any of them. So since this poll is pretty straightforward, I'm going to go ahead and jump forward to the results. All right, so 23% of people, yes, we have great visibility into our supply chain and have a proactive approach. I think that's amazing. It looks like the two different no answers tied at around 39% each. So no, but we have a plan, and no, and we don't have a plan. I actually didn't know how this question was going to go. I had a feeling of how I thought it was going to go, but if like 90% of people said yes, it's really going to throw off the second part of this presentation. So for all of you that answered no, we'll use the next few slides to share the solutions that we found to be really impactful for our customers. And this starts with leveraging over-the-map visibility to anticipate disruptions before they occur.
I think, as you look ahead, or, even, I'd love to understand the point in time kind of aspect of where we are today. As I look at the news out of FedEx recently, or, what's happening with capacity. Like if you go back a few to the poll and say like, hey, finding capacity is my biggest problem today. Those strategies that you had in place change and have to evolve, right? And so anticipating those challenges becomes your greatest kind of asset to build into your organization and how you can action around it. And, as Jason mentioned earlier, disruptions are part of the supply chain. They're not something oftentimes we can control. There's no way around them, whether it's a result of a world-changing pandemic, weather patterns like drought. You can hear California, water shortages and heat problems and so on and so forth, and eventually impacting electricity and power generation, traffic or port blockages. There's no visibility solutions, and tracking dashboards provide a view into where carriers are not yet assigned or loads are being tracked, shipments are running late, et cetera, et cetera. So the supply chain manager doesn't need to manually check each shipment to identify issues. There's over-the-map visibility into loads with ELDs or automation that provides tracking location is important, rather than using manual calls or application inputs that can alert you where there could be a potential delay. And here in a few slides, I'll talk about how machine learning technology then leverages the real-time weather or traffic data to monitor, predict shipment arrival times and potential delays. Taking external factors aside for a moment, things that are out of your control. Let's look at your day-to-day execution. And believe me, that's hard in itself, right? You have to recognize the complexity that you're trying to manage, and how can I consume this in a way that allows my teams to execute? And as I watch logistics teams, it's a 1,000 tasks that you get right over and over and day out, hour by hour, that adds up to very significant impact or excellent execution. And so you should be thinking, am I using technology? Do I have observations that helps my team identify what needs to be actioned first and drive the greatest impact? Tracking dashboards are a great example of this. They highlight digestible chunks, right? So if you take all the information and signals that you're receiving, and can you have your teams, does it help your teams focus and provide a view that needs to be actioned first and by what function? Using the dashboards to monitor and create alerts, highlighting where shipments are delayed or off track for one reason or another, empowers your team so that they can identify what the issue is proactively and adjust expectations or potentially reroute. In addition to that, tiles or filters can be customized for the employees or the team, and so allow them to focus on specific areas, whether it be issue resolution, let's just say late pickup, or everyday tasks like assigning to a carrier, to make the team more productive, right? So From there, you talk about, well, what tools do I need to assess, right? We're talking about large amounts of information coming in. How do I break that down? And so once you start distilling the information, you start looking at data analytics and machine learning to help you drive into those issues, really to assess and identify what is regularly occurring, what's highly inefficient, or you have quality control problems. And at the end of the day, what needs to be actioned most urgently. That's innumerable data points available. The challenge is how you break it up. And when paired with technology, data becomes a tool that can help scale operations. For some examples, we've seen here, for example, we've seen something like facility delays. You may notice a certain shipment route or lane is regularly delayed, but you may not understand why. By leveraging machine learning, for example, you could quickly pinpoint a specific aspect of the execution that's causing delay. Whether it's wait times at a facility, maybe a carrier is being inefficient, maybe something's wrong with the packaging, unrealistic appointment times, the list could go on. But how do you get to that answer very quickly? While great visibility provides instant access to data, supply chain tech lets you understand how everything is working around you. ML can help you drill into those specific details and find out where there are holdups, quality issues, or waste in the supply chain. For example, you may have visibility into data that needed to be determined a shipment is running late, but it's up to the shipping manager to check the location of the shipment, compare it with the projected ETA, check for the scheduled delivery time, which all takes a lot of effort, right, if you do it by shipment basis. Instead, how about you use technology to quickly solve that by having them identify all those 3 or 4 data points and provide a prediction. Look at the weather, look at the traffic, and where they are relative to where they're headed, and determine if there's an alternative option to address quickly, or even simply to get on the phone. One thing about visibility is that it creates a massive amount of data, right? Correlating back to trying to track the real world is actually very hard. Within Shipwell, we do have a lot of information. We get gigabytes a minute around tracking information around what's happening out in the real world, helping our customers understand where things are. On top of that, it takes time for a person to identify the corrective actions, significantly longer than it takes a computer. Even at companies with no access to AI, 40% have reported too much information, whether it's trivial or whether it's just simply not useful for them at that point, as a top concern in a study done by Apex. Data overload or abundance of trivial information are challenges many organizations face. So you're trying to become data-centric, trying to implement decision information, but I'm trying to highlight that's not enough. When looking at any solution that promises to deliver more data, it's vital to ensure that there are methods confirming the right information is being delivered to the right people at the right time. As you'll need to break down as I previously said, you need to break down your supply chain to understand what isn't tracking or is delayed, understand what is going on in your own logistics system, right? In the way your network is being executed, and how can you then personalize this information to make it work for your organization? I like to think of supply chain operations as an iceberg, right? Most people are only going to see the tip that's outside on the water, right? Let's just say, for example, it's where you pick up and where you drop off, right? Very simple in concept actions, but they don't see what all goes on that make that happen. We need all that information that lives in the main mass of the iceberg. What's really going on, what's really going to alert us as to what needs to be actioned is going to be in those details. And that is what makes it digestible and actionable for logistics teams. So if you want to be able to act on that information quickly, you really need a method of keeping it all under control. In our platform, what we call Compass is for customers to get personalized filters and tags to flag issues on your operations that has to deem high priority. And automated alerts will notify your team when things are not tracking smoothly. We utilize Compass that acts as your control plane, right? So we want to be able to show you what's happening. Everything that is going on in your supply chain is in a single place. It's consumed by all the signals and is put into digestible pieces so that for your shipments, and then you can take action right in that screen to resolve it immediately.
Thanks, Ishan. I think that's super true. And this is something that one of our customers mentioned as being really vital to their business throughout, really the experience they had through the COVID e-commerce boom. I think for them in particular, they saw 3 times more sales, so they had to triple the number of trucks on the road. But obviously, they as a group and the department did not scale with that in terms of headcount. So really then you have to start taking all that unstructured data, making it more structured, getting the information more tightly organized onto a single screen, because you're no longer in a place where you can go one by one and try to uncover these sort of details. So these issues are now identified and flagged directly on a dashboard, making it possible to ensure that all orders arrive when they're expected to, and then those people in the department can spend more time on customer service. So it's essential that those issues are identified in a place where people can not only see the live status of the shipments, but be able to interact with them and then directly take action from it.
Couldn't agree more with that. Of course, once your tech-enabled supply chain creates the structured data, whether it's through visibility or through other means, machine learning can begin to ingest it, and it becomes a lot easier to resolve these issues, which brings us to the next point. Have I mentioned that disruptions are going to naturally occur in this presentation? So the final step in minimizing that negative impact they can have on your supply chain is around finding proactive resolution to issues, right? You have to get ahead. We talk about visibility in kind of 3 distinct buckets, which a lot of folks provide what's happened in the past. Some folks provide, what's happening today. And then I think what you should be looking for in your solutions and technology is what's going to happen. And by connecting visibility and machine learning, we found it much easier to identify kind of what's coming up and what corrective actions you can take. It's about action. It's about getting to resolutions. So we've learned that tools like Compass enable users to tackle everyday tasks and track and resolve issues. Simplify actions like automating pushing loads to routing guides or assigning those to carriers, or even simple as sending an email or making a call. So that tracking is enabled. Leveraging Compass empowers that user to quickly and efficiently resolve or adjust to any disruption that does happen. So what's next? We have the data, we have the tools. How do we make our team as productive as possible? And I want to kind of take a step back and make sure you see the big picture and try to state it another way, right? We're capturing a lot of information and signals, right? There's a lot of information being sent that way. We want you to be able to have that organized in a way that you can digest it and say, comprehend what's happening. And then eventually what we want you to do is take action on it, right? And so you think about, am I having the right information that's being available? Is it being organized for me? And can I take action? So knowing when there's a problem is an important first step, but quickly solving that problem is obviously the final goal. To do that, we need to identify the parts where human intervention is still needed, right? So it's not something that we're talking about taking, all of this out of the hands of a person, but there are a lot of tasks that can be automated that are repeatable and happen day in, day out. And that empowers people to spend time where they're most impactful. So when the solution is clear, contacting carriers or rescheduling appointments, maybe updating information, the solution can typically navigate this to different systems where human error can enter the equation. On top of that, the volume of data available is often too much. And so we need to be able to present that information in a way that they can action themselves.
Yeah, no, I think that makes lots of sense. I think this is something that we've seen firsthand, through the high volume of shipments that our ShipWell logistics team manages. We could very easily slip into the I have too much information to work with category. And having a network of shippers, trucks, routes, crisscrossing the country, it also means that we have lots of different people set to manage specific areas and regions. To avoid this, what we did is we set up customizable tiles within one of the dashboards you showed earlier with shipment list filters to narrow down what they see on their own dashboard. This allows them to focus on their own book of business or region, even within their own filter set. They can highlight shipments on a watch list, which allows them to flag the most critical or hot shipments and ensure that they're on track through the life of the load. Manually checking each shipment, identifying issues, communicating solutions, resolving those, it all takes a lot of time. Not to mention it adds a lot more stress to an already pretty volatile kind of situation. So this is really where machine learning can come in. Machine learning algorithms can be applied. They're already applied to Gmail and my thermostat, but they can be applied especially for this to analyze data captured when an issue is identified in order to generate actionable KPIs and recommendations for the optimal action to take. So while machine learning technology can make predictions that help your team set reasonable expectations for customers, it takes only seconds for the system to decide what action needs to be taken and then provide suggestions or flag them for your attention. So we're going to go into our last poll now. What would have the most impact on your supply chain? 1, data analytics. 2, automation technology. 3, streamlined visibility into shipments. Or 4, additional personnel, more people. So we're going to pause here for just a second. Based on the solutions we've discussed, really curious what people think about this one. I think another way to frame this question is to think about where you feel you have the biggest gap in your tools, whether that's data analytics, automation technology, streamlined visibility, or additional people on the team. So with that, let's jump in and see the results. So coming in at number 1 was automation technology at 58%, really leading by. Second was data analytics at 25%. And then really towards the bottom, tied for 3rd and 4th, was visibility into shipments and additional personnel. So automation technology really won by a lot, which I think is actually pretty interesting, because I think if we would have done this poll, it's called a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, I feel like visibility would have won. But I think now we're seeing that curve where maybe you have visibility into your shipments. You can know where any of your 500 shipments per day are, but then what? Then what do you do with them? And that's sort of how I'm personally interpreting the results from this one. So now that we've reviewed the different ways we can minimize the damaging impact of disruptions, let's talk about the impact. So a recent study found that supply chains with machine learning powered capabilities are over 65% more effective, with reduced risk and lower overall costs. We've seen this in quite a few of our customers and found that it led to really 3 major impacts to their operation. First is the ability to scale through increased efficiencies. So in the past year, we've seen a huge influx of demand for e-commerce transactions, increased more in the past year than in the past 10 years prior. And so much of that essentially happened in March and April of 2020. And since then, it's really only continued. So as a result of that, many of our customers have had quickly scaled their production and shipping. The second impact is that decreased operational costs as a result of fewer disruptions. So every time there's a delayed shipment or a hot shipment or an express requested shipment, logistics costs go up. And most logistics departments that I've been a part of or been close to, they're not really in the mandate of increasing costs. I'm sure many of you were tasked with actually decreasing your costs by 10% last year, despite a global pandemic. And so there's really no room in that budget for increasing inefficiency, especially set against the backdrop of tightening capacity and increasing shipment costs. And finally, the third impact is a better strategy as a result of forward-looking operations. So it's easy, especially in operations, to get tied down in the day-to-day and be reactive to what's happening. I think that's the default position for most people. By leveraging technology, you'll be able to make your team more effective in their roles and use that automation and predictive machine learning to free up time to focus on forward-looking actions, which in turn makes your team happier and makes the customer happier. So I'm going to turn it over to Ishan to wrap up, and then we will go into some of the Q&A.
Thanks, Jason. So, one of the things we're really excited about helping our customers and hopefully helping you down the road is how to think about where you are today and what you're moving to, right? What should you be expecting out of your supply chain, right? Take into account that change is happening at a faster pace. We hear companies that are going from annual bids to quarterly bids and maybe mini bids or even more frequently, just because the rate of change is accelerated, right? The rise of e-commerce has changed the expectations of customer experience when it comes to delivering their orders. And that extends beyond the final customer into the supply chain. And so are you prepared? Are you ready to deal with kind of those rising demands and changes in your market that you participate in? Are you thinking about the tools that help you consume the information that's available today, provided in a presentation that allows you to make decisions, and then take action, right? And then, as as each of you kind of highlighted, like what will have the biggest impact in my logistics operations, and presumably to either cut cost or scale, right? And are those actionable steps something that help you respond to market conditions? So thank you for your time, and we're really looking forward to your questions that you have, that hopefully we can provide insights or a little bit about what we do. I'll turn it over to Julia to see what questions there are for Jason and I.
Fantastic. Well, thank you both for sharing your perspectives. At this time, we will go ahead and begin our Q&A. So if you haven't done so already, please go ahead and submit your questions using that Q&A box in your console. We do already have a few questions here. So let's see. What do you see as the biggest challenge in the industry for the upcoming year? I'd love to get both of your perspectives. Jason, if you would like to share first.
Yeah, I think that's we've started with real questions right away. Okay. The biggest challenge I see for the upcoming year. It's interesting that sort of the year is sort of the qualifier here. I mean, I think that if you just look back at the past year, whether it was the list of problems I cited, whether it was Winter Storm Uri in Texas Southwest, COVID is a big one, obviously Suez Canal, all these. There are a lot of optimizations that a business would have had to make in this time, right? So we knew lots of businesses that had to figure out how they reroute shipments through Europe because the Suez Canal, or maybe their freight forwarding became air because of all the port congestion. And I think when I look through what the biggest challenge of the next year is going to be, I think we're still in a world where we see capacity getting really tight for over the road. I think we're still in a world where we see the port congestion continuing, maybe not as severe as it was, but in some aspects. And so realistically, as a business, you're going to be tasked with still delivering goods on time and in full. And so you're going to have to make more real-time optimizations across those modes, while at the same time dealing with more shipments than you probably have ever had to deal with before. And I think that's probably the biggest thing I see coming for the next year.
Excellent. Ishan, you want to share yours with us as well?
Sure. As I look at what companies are struggling with, it's the getting creative with your supply chain. We talk about some of the edge aspects of what's happening with how do you deliver to the final mile, or hey, my capacity is constrained in shipping lanes that are coming out of China. What are my alternatives, right? And they may not have the experience or background to necessarily execute that, so they're delving into new areas. And so I look at that creative aspect of supply chain. What are my options, and how is tech enabling me as a company to execute that in a way that's efficient and with my operating parameters, is how I look at over the next year, like shift as supply chain, kind of the demand ripples through the supply chain. How do I adjust?
Excellent. Next question here. We've got some really great ones rolling in. Are there disruptors that you've started to see that we should be preparing for? Jason,
sure,
I'll let you take this one first.
Yeah, sure. I'll take this one first. I think probably the setting that's worth mentioning is, if we were on like a flat road with speed bumps, that would be a disruption that you would see in the future. You'd prepare for it, you'd overcome it, and then you'd be back on your flat road waiting for the next speed bump. But I don't think that is representative of the logistics industry today, because it's not a flat road. I mean, due to COVID and sort of changing consumer demand and behavior, we are essentially climbing a mountain. We're climbing a mountain with speed bumps. So yes, there are still speed bumps, but even when you get to the other side of it, it's still a different world than where you were when you started it. And so I think when I look at the disruptors that we see that we're preparing for, not a meteorologist, can't predict the next hurricane. But even when you look past that, I think you're still going to be in a world where the next 5 years of supply chain don't look like the last 5 years. And so all these trends, they're not going to go away. I mean, e-commerce spiked in the last year. I don't think it's going to go back. So really, as we start looking at how these trends continue and probably very realistically accelerate, given the growth of technology, changing consumer demands, I think so much of it is what's happened in the past year that you're now better prepared for, knowing that, the last year of change, maybe you only have the next 6 months to really adapt to it. Because if you are not, I'd say that there are a lot of companies out there that have totally shifted their supply chain strategy for how they get more proactive and how they get much more visibility into everything from their manufacturing line to the customer experience, that they're very focused on getting very good at this. And so I think that's the disruptive. The disruption is the world has changed, which might be a cop-out answer. So Ishan, if you have a more direct answer, happy to use that one instead.
I guess the way I look at it is, if you classify what we're going through right now as a bullwhip effect of kind of a sharp shutdown, and we're trying to come back and catch up in demand, the disruption I see coming ahead is the constraints of, if you look at plane orders, ship orders, truck orders, and to combine that with the fact that the materials to build those, that capacity is constrained and actually costs are rising quite significantly. I feel like that we're going to be in a longer period or protracted period of constraints around capacity across like a more global picture than we think. And I think that's going to have a longer term effect. And I think some folks are anticipating 12 months, and I think it probably go to 24 months. And I think a lot of folks' plans don't extend far enough out to do that. And so once we start getting into 6 to 9 months further down the road and they start seeing no relief, that's going to cause some pretty significant changes to the way people think.
Ishan, not to agree with you, because I don't always agree with you, but I agree with you on this one. I think this is actually a really good example of, when you look at the bullwhip effect, this is an example of real-time decisioning, right? The bullwhip effect can traditionally happen because of lags in either communication, sales process, manufacturing, things like that, not having everything connected in one place. Whereas if you have it connected in one place and you are taking that information in real time to make decisions, there's a lot of really practical decisions you'll probably make as a business. For example, like if you see inventory backing up, maybe you don't pay $15K for that container that you thought you really needed to have. Whereas before, with disparate systems that weren't totally connected, you could have different people coordinating what they thought was their mandate, but not able to optimize for the entire business's supply chain at once.
Excellent. We've got one more question here. Have you automated the decision-making process too? Jason, I'll start with you.
So we try to be really careful with automating decision-making. I think for us, we've always viewed that people still have really good insights into business logic or decision-making. I think right now we're most focused on taking all the disparate data, packaging it in a way that it's easy and helpful for people to make the decisions they want to make, and have frontline workers make really good business decisions as well. There are some parts that we do automate, but it's automated really because a user said to automate it. I think we've tried to be very careful with this idea of like black box or lights out logistics. There's definitely a future where those things are really very well understood. I don't think we're there yet. I think we're still very much in turning this unstructured data into structured data and really helping people get much more efficiency out of their day-to-day roles. I would see us still being years off. Some companies might adopt these sort of things faster. For Shipwell specifically, we have an automation engine and we're built on a REST API. If a company wants to automate something, they have all the tools to be able to do that. But I think for us as a design philosophy, that's something we've been careful about. But I won't speak about design philosophy. That's very much an Ishan question. So Ishan, feel free.
Yeah, decision-making for me is, when we talk about automating, starts with transparency. So when we talk about within the product team, we talk about transparency, trust, and then being able to take actions. And so the way I look at the evolution of our product and then technology in general, right? If you look at ethical machine learning or ethical artificial AI, it's about being transparent about what decisions are being made, why they're being made. And so that's where the majority of the focus is. And what Jason was referring to is when we provide the information, that's going to serve as input for the next time you're presented with a decision you need to make. And eventually that becomes something that is trusted and therefore it can be actionable. it really is more about the user of the journey of the user rather than the technology itself.
Excellent. Next question here. Will companies be looking for additional space in non-traditional space, such as a short-term warehouse or vacant retail space? Jason, I'll turn this one to you.
Oh, interesting. All right, so this is the departure from the traditional warehousing 5-year lease into something more flexible. I mean, I think that's a trend we see in the market today. And I think there are a number of flexible warehousing sort of companies out there that help with like e-commerce fulfillment and things like that. I mean, for Shipwell specifically as a transportation management software system, we have good partnerships with warehousing management systems. We like to integrate. I mean, for us, the value really comes when you can integrate deeply into like an ERP and see orders coming in, integrate into a WMS if you have one so you know where your physical inventory is held, and then integrate into your financial software as well so you can do all the freight pay and audit, settlement, bill pay stuff. And I think we've always seen the TMS as being the part that connects those pieces together. Now, one of the trends we do see, though, is a lot of companies are engaging us for things around the data that we're seeing from the software. Things like network design, center of gravity analysis. One of our customers is one of the largest meal kit companies in the world, especially in the US, and they were looking at how do they ensure their SLA around delivery times because no one wants to receive a meal kit a day late. That's a big problem, actually. So, in terms of where they were looking at manufacturing facilities, should they be looking at additional expansions or distribution centers for that? And so I think as a broad trend, yes, we are already seeing that. I think the trade-off, though, and the part that is difficult is it requires a lot more visibility and coordination. And I think the real limiting factor is a company in a good enough spot in their sort of curve of sophistication, as we like to call it, where they feel like they can integrate all these more disparate pieces and intentionally make their supply chain more complex because there's an added value. And the short answer is yes. It'll depend on the company.
Yeah, I think my perspective is a little bit different in that I think companies be looking for that, but through, to use a term that Jason used earlier, black box type operations, where they're realizing they're leveraging this short-term space, but they're providing it through a service that handles all the specific challenges that Jason was mentioning, rather than trying to do it themselves, because it is complicated. There is a lot of sophistication and process and tracking that you have to build into, and it's really not a short-term change, right? And so I think over time what you'll see is companies popping up more and more that have all that done for you, and you be able to hand off that, let's just say, last mile of distribution of goods to these companies that have both the logistics and the warehousing provided within their network to connect for you. So it's just an extension, but I think there's going to be blurring of lines, I think, around like how that service is provided, rather than making individual investments as companies into this short-term space rental.
Great. Well, that is all we have time for today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for today's webinar. Of course, to Shipwell for partnering us with our presentation. And of course, to you guys, Jason and Aishan, for sharing your insights with us. As I mentioned, we'll be sending a link to this recording to you tomorrow using the email that you registered with. We hope you'll join us again for our next FreightWaves webinar. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.